Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And we come to you in full recognition that Brian and I are the only two people standing between you and the weekend. But we promise that this presentation will be informative and hopefully at least a little fun. So I'm Galen Charlton with the Equinox Open Library Initiative.
And I'm Brian Pichman. I am the head of systems with ByWater Solutions.
So we were asked to talk about the impact of AI on libraries and related institutions. And as you can judge by the title of our slide, the impact is a little painful. So what we are going to do is to talk about what these AI bots are, what the impact has been, how they can be mitigated so that your Koha catalog can stay available and online. And at the very end, we will answer Stephen's question about AI Z3950 and juicy library metadata. All right, so as a statement of the problem, there's an utter avalanche of automated web crawlers and bots that are hitting publicly available websites for a couple of different reasons, which we will get into, that have had the effect of overloading a lot of public websites and making it necessary to put in mitigations. Nobody is exempt, and unfortunately, libraries, despite the long and proud tradition of libraries supporting public access to information and entertainment, and generally making metadata available, are not at all exempt from this invasion. And arguably, library catalogs may be particularly interesting to at least a few of the crawlers. So I'm talking a bit about a lot about crawlers, also known as spiders or bots. What is it? It's just basically a computer program that fetches content from a website. And this can range from something that's very simple, makes the raw HTTP requests and grabs out the content, up to and including systems that run so-called headless browsers that are basically more or less the same as the browser you used yourself, including the ability to run JavaScript. More on that in a bit. Often, crawlers are intended to harvest an entire website, and the purpose can be benign, although increasingly so less benign. So these are not new. Back from the early days of Google, there have been a lot of crawlers searching, crawling the web to fill search engine indexes. The Internet Archive runs a pretty important crawler to archive the web, and libraries, either intentionally or by accident, also run crawlers. If you squint a little, any Koha system that uses its OAI client is doing a bit of crawling. If you're running Aspen Discovery, you can point Aspen at any website and have it be indexed. Often that's your library homepage or your libguides, but in principle, if your library and you want to do a lot of crawling, which you might legitimately want to do for local history purposes, you too can join the invasion. You'll just be a lot nicer about it than some of the other characters we'll be talking about. And of course, there was a distinct point in time where lots of libraries were encouraging their catalogs to be crawled because, the notion of getting your holdings into web search engines so that patrons can search for a title and know that their local library has that item available. One of the ways that it can, that can happen is through direct crawling of library catalogs. Now, there are also other ways it happens, but that's why if you've, in the context of koha, you've heard of sitemaps, you've heard of microdata, embedded in the catalog results. There's actually been a fair amount of effort, spent by the koha community to make our catalogs friendly and accessible to machines, so that the reach of our metadata can be expanded to the general web. And of course, lots and lots of libraries have explicitly asked the question in their RFPs and other places, can the system facilitate having your holdings show up in Google? But crawlers need to be managed because, the act of fetching a web page consumes a little bit of a system resources, often a tiny bit. But if in order to present the result, you're searching a database or an internal index to display the results, that, relatively speaking, can be a bit expensive in terms of system resources. So you want to make sure that crawlers don't excessively hit database-backed websites, lest they overwhelm it for human users. So what is a good example of a database-backed website? A library catalog. So, the other thing about bots is they have the ability to make requests with pretty much any degree of frequency you can imagine, ranging from polite every 5 seconds or so to literally thousands of times a minute. And what's a good name for something that's requesting searches from your library catalog 1,000 times a minute? For many systems, that's a good old-fashioned, denial of service attack. So, in the good old days of 5 years ago, there were various ways that you could say, okay, you can crawl us, but please be considerate. So one mechanism was the so-called robots.txt file, which never enforced anything, but it was a request to say, say in the context of a koha site, please don't run searches. Please just pull records from the sitemap. Please don't try to go to the patron account page, because it won't serve you. And many bots actually did respect that. Another thing you could do was to check the so-called user agent, a bit more on that later, and say, oh, hi, you are being bought, or a hrefs bot or so on. I don't like you. Please go away. And it was straightforward to say, okay, we won't serve requests from that source. And then, there were also other approaches around blocking IP addresses. If somebody was getting a bit pushy. So what you see here is actually, if you look in the code documentation, kind of, an example minimal robots.txt for a koha system, which basically says, you, the bot, please don't try to run a catalog searches.
In the good old days too, you could also specify times when those indexes could take place, which is really nice. So some people that were fancy would say, yeah, you can index or SEL my site, midnight to 5, and that was your window. And the robot file would go, okay, I'll only check once a day between these hours. And it would know to check again that period of time. It's really slick.
Yeah. or also, you're welcome to crawl, but please request only every 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So the good old days is, nice, friendly robots most of the time. There definitely were bad actors, but they were, relatively speaking, less frequent or less common. And with some effort in various ways, you could identify them and keep the usage down to a dull roar. So this is about 5 years ago. Welcome to the land of today. So what we've seen, unfortunately, is an utter explosion of bots and crawlers from various sources, many of which are basically trying to cash in on the AI boom. It's one thing to be able to manage a few bots, and many libraries were able to get away without having to engage with, say, Cloudflare day one, because the level of usage by automatic bots was reasonable. But as all of us who run or use koha systems have discovered the hard way, not so much anymore. So, with that, there's a couple of things going on with the AI bots. Some of them are just trying to crawl as frequently as possible to get juicy text to train their engines. But others, in the course of chat interaction, if you use Perplexity, you can ask about a website, and they will go ahead right on the spot, do a lookup of a website to gather metadata. So the thing is there are two distinct types of AI bot usage patterns to look for.
The rough one is the one where everyone and their mother wants to build a language model. In order to build a language model, you need a lot of data. And the best way to find data is an open system of some kind that has easy access to information that's nicely cataloged and metadata, and libraries do that exceptionally well. So it makes like a good target to gather and build an LLM.
Yeah. So, and of course, one of the things that means is that a lot of, that we literally millions of human hours of work poured into library cataloging over, well, at this point, over a century, has attracted at least some interest. And the thing is I don't know the answer to this question. I am awfully curious the degree to which there's any preference for library metadata or not, or if it's just a side effect of AI trainers trying to pull as much text as possible. But slide mentions the breakdown of the rough social order. The thing about the bots is this is not just a technical problem. It is also a social problem in a real sense and a regulatory problem, in that any sense of social norms that made some bot operators avoid hammering things like library catalogs seems to have fallen down the wayside, putting library catalog operators in the position of playing the worst game of whack-a-mole ever. So with that, the upshot is that we have a great a deal of impact where the constant requests can bring systems down, are functionally indistinguishable from a distributed denial of service attack. And even if it doesn't take your catalog down, more bandwidth that gets consumed, more compute that gets assumed, and there's staff time involved, either on your part or on the part of your service provider, to mitigate all of this?
And I think the reason why we've seen this increase in the last like 2 years is there's like, so back in it was like Google and Bing and Ask Jeeves were like your search engines of choices. So if those hit your website every single day, you're fine. Like it's not impactful. There's not enough people running it. But now with the 14 well-known language model companies that are out there constantly scraping the web, that's where it becomes a problem. And then we're going to show you an app too that's like free to use, and you can say this website I want to scrape all the data from, and then even on the website it goes, we can beat past bot protection, so we'll work anywhere, and so that's what you're going up against on a frequent basis.
Yes. So, by the way, this is a slightly dangerous presentation, because we will be pointing you at the way that you too can be evil and join the AI bot revolution.
Take down your neighbor library you don't like.
Yeah. So please don't do this. So with respect to gallery, library, archives, and museum hosting, the impact to availability, to the cost of putting these resources up, I'm afraid, and lots of the people in the library community are afraid, is that it's going to decrease the willingness to make these resources publicly available. And things you can do to block the bots can sometimes get in the way of legitimate human users, or even legitimate automated users, thereby decreasing access. And if you're self-hosting, it also makes it more time-consuming to do your job that way. So now that I've laid out the problem, we'll go ahead and switch over to Brian to talk about this game of whack-a-mole.
That's good. So we're going to go through a couple things that we both have tried initially when I first approached the critical mass that they're at today. So we'll walk through a couple of ways we mitigated that. So the first way to do it was with our robots.txt files, or doing like, hey, would you like to crawl your website? Sure, just don't do it a lot. Like, do it between these hours. Don't send thousands and thousands of requests all at once. Do one query at a time. And most of the time, people respected that. And so this robots.txt thing that we alluded to earlier isn't like a legal requirement. Like nobody says you have to follow that, and if you don't follow the robots.txt file, like you go to jail. There's no like internet policing of utilizing this resource. It's just a resource that works. I'm blind, so I gotta make this screen a little bit bigger. One sec. Perfect. And it worked, but like most people respected it. It was like, okay, like a handshake agreement. I'll follow what's in there. I won't abuse it. But now that's a lot different. You can still set it up. There's still people that respect it, but vast majority of the world doesn't care. One of the ways that if you're in like a lurch and it's happening, one of the things that we talked about was turning off the public OPAC. And that was like a quick semi-ish win, as long as the bot or the agent or the model wasn't doing a search in a different way. Turning off the public OPAC mitigated much of that risk. And I wish I had like historical screenshots of when this was happening, because we would just see like if you're looking at like a feed of logs, it was moving so fast you had to like stop it so you can read for a brief minute. And like we're looking at thousands of search terms within a second or two. And then imagine that search term going over and over and over again. Every time there's a search, there's a database ping. And every time there's a database ping, that means there's a query. And that query then has to load back on the web resource. And that's where you see your bog downs occur from bot attacks. And so the other method that's been around for eons is blocking. And it was usually pretty effective. Like you see an IP abusing you, you're like, cool, see the IP. It's the only IP hitting us repetitively. Let's block it. Or you can do entire like geo IP blocking, so you can block by country. or you can block by what's called an ASN, so a range of IPs. And that would sometimes work really well too. But nowadays, when there's a bot or something like that, they're querying thousands of IPs. Like it looks like a DDoS attack because there's so many different IP addresses doing the exact same search queries, but it's really just something trying to gather a lot of information all at once. So why do we want to block? Blocking IP, so you have a couple ways to do it. You can block IP on your server, which isn't really resource intensive. It sees a bad IP, it kills the connection, and away it goes. Or you can block on like a firewall level, which is more advantageous because you don't require system resources to manage this block list. And you can do that through like IP tables on the server or firewall rules. Anything to add on that one?
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention in the koha context that there's can be a big difference between requesting static resources like your router logo versus dynamically generated pages like search results. Like the slide said, if the bots were only interested in the images, wouldn't necessarily be a big deal at all. But that but that's where if you dive into the details about what matters, expense, but the computation matters a lot.
And then obviously more system resources. You pay if you're self-hosting or hosting somewhere else, you have to pay for bandwidth, and the more bandwidth you have, the more costly it becomes. And so the way like network and IP blocking works, and I alluded to this on the previous slide, it's simple and it used to be very effective because you could see the IPs, easy, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But now there's even ways where like it's a legitimate IP address, like it's an actual user, but they're being like a malicious actor is masking their IP as someone else or using a VPN. And if other people are using that same VPN service, now you just eliminated good traffic and bad traffic at the same time. So it's a very much what we call a game of whack-a-mole of, all right, here's this good IP, you got to look it up, validate, and it starts to become more of a pain. But easy days, it was easy. You had like one log, 5,000 hits from one IP, the rest were a few dozen, and you're like, easy, I know which one's the bad one. Today, not as much. The other thing that we did too was we did geo-IP blocking at ByWater. So we specified what countries we would allow access into the data center. So that was blocked on the network layer, which made things effective. But then there's US AI bot companies as well, and they were easy to spin up. And other countries that have their own botnets also have US IPs. And so it doesn't work forever, but it's a good stopgap for initial runs. And so these are your options, and those are the outcomes. So we can block by country, but again, they come from other addresses. You can buy IPs. I can be in like, I don't know, Germany, and I can buy a US IP address and put it into a pool that I have access to. And I learned that recently. And so geo-IP blocking works, but not always. You can do ranges. So you can say this whole set of IPs is bad. I keep seeing bad traffic. And again, that was the initial reactions. And that's what some people are doing still, is just blocking by IPs. We have a couple of articles we'll share with you. One was a university that they said they spent like 3 whole months just combing through logs and blocking IPs. But by the time they finished, I'm willing to bet there's a whole new set of 3 months worth of IPs they now have to block.
Yeah, and one comment I'll make is this is the tiniest drop in the bucket, but any safe browsing training sessions or computer security sessions give to your patrons can actually help this situation a little bit. Because in the cases where the bots are going through US residential IP addresses, at least in some cases, those addresses are either because the home routers have been compromised by a malicious botnet, or in other cases where users have been putting in plugins on the web browsers that can get directed by a malicious plugin vendor to do things like participate in this kind of botnet, because
if your home browser is occasionally making a silent request to a library catalog, you're not going to notice, your ISP isn't going to notice, but, any patron who learns about being careful about installing plugins or software, or taking the time to do a security check, can fractionally help be a problem. So if you ever had any doubts about whether your patron education programs were having an effect, this is actually not a bigger thing in the grand scheme of things, but a real thing. We're helping patrons improve their information security game, can be helpful to the overall internet ecosystem.
Yeah. And they design a lot of these systems that do the scraping and do the searching. Like the design framework of it isn't to be like, oh, the server's running slow. Maybe I'm causing it. I should slow down. It'll just be like, I'll just stack these queries, and when the server comes back, I'll just continue where I left off. Like it's programmatically designed to gather data, not programmatically designed to be ethical. And that's where the whole like ethical use of AI and everything else comes into fruition. And so it's fairly inexpensive to block the web server load balancer level. And you can do these blocks in a variety of different ways. There's a tool set called a WAF, which stands for Web Application Firewall. If you see that word anywhere, that's what that means. I don't think I have anything else to add on that, but it's inexpensive. Most of the time comes from like a user looking at logs and going, okay, is this a safe IP or not? Like a good process that some system admins will do is they'll take an IP. There's a website called IP Quality Score, and they're like the equivalent of like, is this a spam email vendor? Like, is this email safe? Where you can throw an IP in, it'll tell you, hey, has this IP been a part of a botnet before? Has it been reported as sending spam before? And you get a lot of really good data out of it. And so when you're looking at your logs to find out, like, am I being scraped that I don't know, that I don't want to be scraped or anything? The old way was looking at user agents, and the respectable thing in the IT world was your user agent, which every request that exists on the internet usually has something called the user agent. It's just a way for a web browser or an automated process to identify itself. And that's really great for system admins to know like what's hitting the server. The thing is, you can change your host, your user agent to anything you want. There is zero guardrails and zero rules in place that say you can't like call yourself Google or Facebook external so you can get through like a bot or a user agent block. So as an example, Facebook uses a user agent called Facebook external. So every time you post a link in Facebook, you know how it like generates an image and stuff? That generation of an image and generation of text is a bot that goes out, pulls that data, and then represents it back into your Facebook post. If I was a malicious actor that was like, wow, they're blocking everything except Facebook external, guess what my user agent is going to be called? And all they do is spend 2 seconds renaming it, and now they can essentially masquerade as Facebook, and no one's the wiser, other than you're suddenly slow and you don't know why. And so there's a few ways where, like, some common examples are like web browsers or Perplexity bot. And some of them are polite enough to like throw in like a descriptive text of what they are. I saw a user agent once from Palo Alto. They're a firewall provider. And the user agent was like, I'm Palo Alto, go to our website to learn more about us. And I was like, that's kind of cute. But anything else to add?
Yeah, and there are a couple, AI crawlers that literally do say, hi, I'm a research project, don't log me. No, we got them anyway. But of course.
They said, please.
Well, yeah, but of course, the name of the game for the large scale operators is to mask what they're doing and to evade this sort of blocking.
And so there's lots of ways you can block by user agent. You can block by user agent in the robots.txt file. You can block by user agents in Apache bad bots configurations. Like there's lots of spots you can take a list of user agents and say, don't let this hit my server. You can put that on a firewall, some of them, or you can put that on your web server, your load balancer. And there's lists that are out there that exist that people scrape together and say, hey, these are all the bots that we know about. Download our list, throw it on your server, and you've blocked them all. But then back to the earlier point, it's really, really easy to change those user agents. And so this method of again, there's no laws in the World Wide Web, apparently, where you can call yourself whatever you like. But the block request will look something like that. One of the other things that you could look at is when you're looking at logs, looking at traffic, sometimes it's easy to figure out like what's human behavior and what isn't. If someone is searching for like Harry Potter and then all the words that meet Harry Potter within a few seconds, either they're really, really good at typing, but most likely it's a bot just trying to scrape data to build an LLM to write Harry Potter fan fiction. Who knows? But it's simple to do. And so if you're looking at logs and you're trying to find like what's human and what's not, there's some really good ways to tell. A really good trick to find out if someone's doing like, this is like a little off tangent, but if you want to look and see if someone's trying to like get into your environment when they're not supposed to, like a pen test, and you're looking at Apache logs and you're looking at error logs that like this page doesn't exist, and you see IP looking for like /WordPress login. If you're running Koha, if you don't know this, you don't have WordPress on Koha, but if you see the word WordPress login, it's probably a really good flag that that address, that source is not a good source. Like it's not human because no one's going to type in your catalog and then try to log in it as a WordPress site. I don't know if I have anything to add. So again, another game of whack-a-mole begins. Like now let's block by user agents. But bots can make them up on the fly, and some are so sophisticated now. If it figures out it's being blocked by user agent, it'll just write itself. Like it be self-sufficient. Sometimes you might block like good. So one of the things that we ran into at ByWater, and that was like a Cloudflare switch, was anyone that had an old version of Firefox would get blocked because malicious actors may use old versions of Firefox. So Cloudflare can read that Firefox user agent and go, oh, this web browser is unsecure, it's not safe, we shouldn't let the traffic through. But as we know, there's a lot of products out there that run on older versions of browsers, and they need to run on older versions of browsers for whatever reason it may be. And so those tools got blocked because they're on older architecture.
Yeah, and Equinox had exactly the same experience, in the course of, dealing with, crawling that was basically randomly making up user agents of outdated browsers. We ran into a situation where a small rural anomaly that didn't have such iniquitous interrupt together to keep their computers updated was in fact using a very old version of Firefox on public access. And this is one example of maybe how the anti-bot mitigations can sometimes get in the way of legitimate users.
Yeah. And so there's like inherent costs with crawlers that exist. And so there's ways where we can make the cost of crawlers expensive. So if you know it's a bot, you could throw up like fake web pages and have it route to them. What Cloudflare has done, they call it, I'm blanking on it now, Labyrinth, AI Labyrinth. And what they did was if it knows it's an AI bot that's collecting data without your permission, it spins up fake websites and continues to spin up fake websites and fake like just garbled text. So the AI bot is stuck on a forever loop of clicking on a page that has just fake text, learning it and just going over and over and over and over again, which I think is hysterical. But luckily, I just say luckily, those companies figured it out, and then they figured out a way to skirt through some of the managed challenges that Cloudflare even uses. And we'll share a link about it, where Perplexity was able to figure out a way to get through bot detection tools. So that's all. I think it's interesting. I get excited about this. You want to talk about the other 2 points?
Dependencies is another, is an open source product that does the same thing. Presented with as many gigabytes of randomly generated garbage that it can consume. But of course, the problem with that approach is, if you have a 100 gigabit network pipe and you're not being metered for bandwidth, sure, feed all the garbage you can. But that's not a description of most collaborators, network requirements. Unfortunately, approaches like dependencies tend to be more of a curiosity than something practical for self-hosters.
But it does feel good to be mean to a bully sometimes. So,
Yeah.
And this is like this. So this tool is called Browse AI. Play with it. There's a free tier, and you can literally point it to any website and say, scrape this website and give me like a CSV, and it does it. Like you just train it once. You show it how a search works, show like what data fields come out of that search, how you can paginate that search, and then you can either upload a bunch of terms, they generate a bunch of terms, and it just burns and churns. And you don't have to be a programmer. You don't like you could just barely know how to use an iPad and be able to use this tool. It's incredibly easy and simple to set up. So where do we end up today? So we showed you all the things that used to work really well, started to work less well in the last couple of years, and don't really work at all today because it's not feasible to block by IPs, it's not feasible to block by user agents. It's way too easy to get around. And so the tool that we're using at ByWater is Cloudflare. And the reason why we picked Cloudflare was the other tools that we mentioned still put a strain on the server. Like the server has to be able to manage blocking, has to be able to know who can block and who doesn't. And there's so many connections the server can still handle. So what Cloudflare is, it's a web application firewall that exists on the edge network. And so before you can get to basically out of your vicinity and head towards the data center, there's Cloudflare servers all over the world that are set up to push traffic through. And when that traffic goes through it, it has a list of rules and demands it has to meet. And so like our rule set is, it can't be a bot, you got to have human-like traffic. And yes, there's always false positives. And Cloudflare does a really good job of dashing us that out and showing us how good are the tools that we have are working, how many things are getting through that might not, or that shouldn't get through. But that's the tool that we end up using. There's a free tier and it works really well actually for like basic websites. We had to go on the enterprise tier because we had to write a bunch of rules that said like this type of traffic, while it looks suspicious, is A-OK. And a good example of that is like if you're doing custom jQuery and you try to save that to Koha, in theory, you could write a malicious script and upload it to a server to get access to it. So Cloudflare goes, I know that's possible. I'm not going to let you upload anything that looks like a SQL script or a jQuery and prevent it. So we had to teach our firewall that that's okay traffic. This is normal. People can do that. And that's our tool. You want to talk about yours?
So Equinox also uses Cloudflare, for a couple of our customers. But one approach we're in the process of rolling out to our customers is something called Anubis. This is relatively recent. It's open source. And the point of Anubis is to implement various tactics to not necessarily tell bots to go away, although they can do that, but to try to change the cost equation for the bot operator. So one thing Anubis can do is say, okay, in effect, here's an expensive mathematical problem that you have to solve through JavaScript. And if your browser solves it, we're not asking patrons to do complicated math in their heads here. They get a token that says, okay, you can go ahead and access the Norway catalog. And the existence of this token can also help monitor traffic in case you discover that bot operators are abusing it. And is simple to deploy, an option for self-hosters.
this, anime character is its branding. So if you deploy it, you may want to take advantage of the option to be a little more boring and arguably a bit more inclusive and put in your own logo or something. So that is a caveat to watch out for. But this is something that is a part of a strategy to make it more expensive and deter bot access to our AI catalogs. But in different ways, say the Anubis-based approach or a Cloudflare-based approach does cycle back to the same thing that literally everybody involved, including the Anubis maintainers and including Cloudflare, is playing a game of, depending on your point of view, cat and mouse or whack-a-mole, because the bot operators are motivated and will do what they can to evade any protection. So the upshot is, unless and until, say, there's a complete end of AI as something that the technologists are hugely interested in, this is a piece of the internet that whether severe thunderstorms or occasionally Jupiter red spot size planetary storms that we'll have to deal with. So I think, I think it's fair to say across the board, that things that can be improved. Certainly don't want this to be a doom and gloom presentation. But nobody has yet licked the problem in the sense of completely, stopping inappropriate traffic. So before we get to questions, I did want to say a few comments about some of the underpinnings, and this is largely directed at self-hosters or for people who want to know a bit more about what's going on. So one nice thing about the bot invasion is it has given a way to or impetus for co-administrators to look at ways that you can tune your koha system for better performance. So if we look at, say, the anatomy of a request, our friendly evil robots make a web request that hits a load balancer or proxy. And what that load balancer is can vary quite a lot depending on how you're hosting koha. And the load balancer or firewall is one step where a request can be rejected. But ultimately, if it passes, it can make its way to Apache, which is another place where the request can be expected and possibly blocked. And then by the time it gets to Plaque, that's one sense where the rubber meets the road in terms of, okay, you might be about to do a catalog search, and that's where it can get expanded. But if it gets past through that point, you get your search results. But as a consequence of this, some tuning parameters you can look at is one, if you install koha out of the box, it will typically operate with, I think, 2 Plaque workers. You can actually tune and increase this number to give your system, a little more capability. And by the way, if you're self-hosting and you're not using a Plaque, please turn that Plaque on. Your patrons will thank you. So will your staff. But there are also considerations about managing system memory. Main thing is you want to make sure that on a Linux system, you don't get too out of memory situations, because those, for various reasons, can be time consuming to get out of. So there are lots of places where you can tweak the resources that are made available to service requests.
Oh, and as a note too, If you are self-hosting, the solve, unfortunately, isn't just to give your computer more resources to handle the bots, because then all that means is now that you can just handle more bots. So you just push the goalpost to have more bad traffic. And so that probably will not be the best choice, is like sticking some more RAM cards in isn't going to make a difference.
Because yeah, the bots will consume any resource, all resources you throw at it. But there can legitimately be situations for normal use of your system where you may figure out that you do want to give it some more resources. Another key thing is it's important to monitor, measure how your resources are being used, pay attention to overall traffic. With the right monitoring, you can do things like say, oh, whoops, a fresh bot has escaped its controls, and be alerted to do something about it. The koha logs in various places are useful information to try to characterize bots and to update your web application firewall or whatever mitigations you're using. But the basic name of the game for log analysis is to get more information about what the bots are up to unfortunately continue the game of cat and mouse. But I can get you to the things where Perplexity, a major, let's say, reputable AI vendor, was caught. Evading bots, anti-bot measures by going to the, this route requests through residential IP things.
And the cool part about using tools like Anubis or Cloudflare, the community that's using it is quite large. And so the people that are on top of it looking at logs, like, it's nice because now it's not just you looking at logs. There's thousands of other people also looking at their logs. And if 100 of those folks are saying, hey, Perplexity got through, what the heck? Like, there's enough people that can like work together to come up with a solve, which is kind of the nice part.
Yeah, and that also implies to alternative approaches like using mod security, for example. There's a lot of community work to characterize these things, and maybe that's a good message to emphasize. You are not alone in suffering under internet weather. By the way, another consideration is a standard koha configuration will have the same app server serving both the staff interface and the public catalog. But this is a matter of configuration. It's not set in stone. So if you find yourself in a situation where your public catalog keeps getting taken down, but you want to ensure that you're still able to circulate or catalog, it is in fact possible to do split the configuration where you have, for example, a set of tag workers that are dedicated just to the staff interface, so that even if patron discovery has gone away, you're not leaving your circulation staff hanging at the circuit as either unable to check out or being forced to implement your online procedures. And of course, whether it's Cloudflare doing it on your behalf or you're managing it, some of the old approaches that don't work in the long run can still be useful tactic. If a new bot, possibly run by an inexperienced operator, props up from a limited IP address range, adding that to your firewall sublog list can still give you some relief. There are also some possibilities of the things that potentially could be done on the koha software level, including adding a cache to the search itself, which might be another way, means of using things like Cloudflare turnstile. And that would match approaches that have been tried in Evergreen and ByWater. So there are mitigations that can be explored by the koha community as a.
And a fun fact about captures too. Remember those like image, I think they still exist. The image captures where you had to like find the pictures of the bicycle. My favorite story about that whole thing is that was how Google trained an image recognition software. So thanks for your hard work.
Yeah, so many things in life are trade-offs. So anyway, to sum up, Boston crawlers are a real problem. Happily, there are mitigations available, but for the foreseeable future, everybody involved in hosting the koha systems will need to be actively managing things and updating mitigations over time. So with that, you are so close to the weekend.
Well, this is our first half. We have a second half still.
Oh, now you tell me.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments?
Ryan, can I steal your mic and ask the two of you to share to answer questions? First up, this is the topic that the conference planning committee. Yeah. Oh, okay. This is the topic that the conference planning committee really wanted a session on. So thank you both so much for agreeing to come and talk about this, for pulling this presentation together. It was very helpful. I'm going to make a comment question before I allow anyone else to mic, because I can. I really appreciate you pulling out the aspect of this as a social problem, underlining that these are bots that were created by humans responding to a perceived financial advantage, opportunity for financial gain. I guess I would just like to use my bully pulpit to underline the use of these large language model tools perpetuates that perception of demand, which perpetuates the growth of these large language models, which is currently burying all our servers. So just, that's my soapbox. You elected me president so I can say stuff like that. Next year I can. Does anyone else have questions or comments?
Well, I heard there's a blame the victim.
George said blame the victim. I am blaming the victim, which is true.
I am going to put on my board member at large unsupported library hat and say that as probably the only person in this room who operates his own system and is the sysadmin, thank you very much. You've given me a lot of ideas.
Awesome.
We tried.
You like the taking down your neighbor library idea the most, I thought.
So are we seeing this issue on all browser-based ILSs, regardless of whether they're open source or proprietary or evergreen, Leap, whatever?
Yeah, every single library catalog and discovery provider is running into this. So if you want to go down to your academic library consortium down the street and talk to them about say how Sarsidonics or XLibris has been handling things. This is very much an area where as much collaboration among all libraries and all service providers, I think would be in the common interest.
Lori asked whose cat that was, and it is Galen's cat. What is the cat's name?
This is Luna, who has opinions about a lot of things and is not shy about expressing them.
With that, we've reached the end of the conference. We'll all sing the traditional conference ending song together now. No.